Hello, everyone. Um, Welcome to tonight's episode, this evening's episode. The title is Glorious Realizations of the Ever-Present Humanity. Where does the attention go in the waking state of being? Our attention goes towards referential advancement, towards efficient vision, towards activity primarily. And so the purpose of life for an animate intelligence is the continuity of activity. For an inanimate intelligence is simply existential. You see, it's like before we had minds of incredible complexity to conceptualize the world. The purpose of life was just to be here. But nowadays, the purpose of life is to do something. People are waiting for actions to liberate them. Either they want some invisible force or God to do the action for them, or they want their civilization or society to act like God, or in some sense, the denial of the extension of self to activity. I find it comes down to this. This denial is internal. That means you can deny yourself many opportunities. You know, people think only others can deny you things. No, you can deny yourself many things by a sort of ideological worship. I find the mind has its true face is unknown. What that means is, regardless of how many incredible scribes we brought to kind of write down who you were as a person, we cannot see the ultimate sophistication that dwells behind your eyes. Humanity needs certain ideals projected. It's as if the mind needs to create certain patterns of movement or space to move, and then it moves. You can say hope is a sort of internal space for external continuity. For me, language is very fascinating. When we look at language, to be honest, in ancient times, did you know magic was language? Some people are going to be like, what do you mean, Mr.Within? You know. What I mean is that when you look at why children are taught spelling, words were evocational, were in some sense an image out of nowhere that could influence the conscious being. And so the words shared or given, I like to see words as things that are given. That means how can I say it? There's been times I've wanted to say these certain things in these talks, and suddenly, like an inner intuitive restriction has occurred, as if I, in some sense, wanted to vocalize a certain abstract view, and as I attempted it, it was as if denied. It was as if it was not the moment for it. To be honest, the title was initially called Realizations of the Ever-Present, but I thought of adding a glorious humanity to it. To be honest, we're occupied with games. I feel as creatures, we are repeating many patterns since childhood, and these patterns they're evolving, but the inner child cannot be gone unless the memory is completely gone, you know. And because memory is part of a field of intelligence, this is something very spectacular to know, but I feel few people will truly comprehend it. Your memories don't belong to you. The moment you experience a moment and a sort of subjective generation occurs of that moment, a sort of memory is kept. That memory is in a sort of field of intelligence. It's not, it's just like the artist gives the artwork away and other people see the artwork. It's no longer only the art, the meaning of the artwork is no longer limited to one viewer. It is in the eyes of many. And to be honest, this is the power of language. It can just move and live on through other minds. There's a story of Gurdjieff. He was 3 years old and his father's on his deathbed, and his father looks at him and he's like, "Son, I messed up. I have nothing to leave you, but at least I can leave you with one thing." And he tells his son, whenever you get angry, don't respond for a whole day. Leave and respond, like take a day before you respond to an intensity. And that advice turned out to be in Gurdjieff's life the greatest thing, something more valuable than financial value was. It's something that had to do with the behavior's advancement, with the advancement of the inner reality rather than just the advancement of the external reality. To be honest, it is very easy to be king of a hill. Just be the first one who gets to the hill and just, you call yourself king. And so in regards to many human beings that are out there, of course, we are very sophisticated creatures. I am even conceptualizing to such a depth, hypothesizing to such a depth that underneath, behind each of our eyes, there is a presence of a universe not segmented. That means before I was named, I was pretty much awareness in the cosmos. Now I'm a named awareness in the cosmos. Usually the concept of freedom, if you could look at certain themes that all human beings seek, the most common one is freedom. However, if the freedom requires to be conditional, every person is going to be fighting a different scenario in their mind. The ability of humanity, the ability of the species is primarily in what it can acknowledge in a common view. That means everything is uncommon. It is our commonalities that distinguish something different, as if two different points in nature suddenly had the same view, therefore could contribute to the same view. The story of humanity is something that must be kept alive in the eyes of children, but it is dismantled. Most children grow up, I think most people, it's not, I consider everybody as a sort of soul of their own moment. Most human beings perhaps get disappointed in this existential landscape. Either you're seeing meaning in the world or it's meaningless for you. If the external reality is meaningless, somehow, there's 8 billion of us here. If external reality is meaningless, then in some sense you are probably in some bunker of inner meaning. That means it's like when you lose hope for the external world, you don't lose hope internally, you know? But what happens is any reason to not care for the external reality is an escapism of where the immediate vehicle of experience is. Some people enter spiritual context thinking that, okay, I'm not the body. And in thinking that way, they deny themselves. They deny themselves continuity. Mr.Within's approach is not a kind of dismissal of matter into some spiritual language. Life for an individual will be very ceremonial. Life for an experiencer as the moment, not just the content in the moment, there's something different there. There's a strange freedom that comes to your mind when it realizes it doesn't have to be a thought. It's not like there is no enforcement. I mean, of course, your emotions regulate a lot of your thoughts. What emotions are is pretty much past context being applied to new experiences, to new concepts. I ask myself, for me, science, since a young age, technology was the greatest inspiration for science. I remember every time when I was a young kid, my parents would buy a new TV or a computer or something, I would always set it up quickly. You know, I was the first one to open the box. And in some sense, the reason I later on realized is like, you see, we no longer have biological mythological landscapes to entertain. We have technological mythological landscapes. It's as if back in the day, Hercules, a person like Hercules, was mythological to us. For the future generations, just a being living in pure nature is going to be mythological so much that technology will intervene in their lives. It's like there's layers of hopelessness hitting the human being. They hit it in mistakes. It's like mistakes or the right action and the wrong action. They're like seeds planted in the moment. Anytime you do something that is efficient to the civilization, it's as if you are helping the heartbeat of your species. You're helping your species breathe a little easier. When we realize we are not thoughts, we are not creatures of language, we will care for what is actually here. We will care for nature in a way where nature will be like, God damn, that's impressive. It's like Gaia was like, oh my God, my children remember me. You see, um, Shakespeare has this quote. He says, some are born great, some achieve greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them. Due to the consideration that we are alive for, it's not like it's like our life had its values in our species. It's like what we're investing in, you know. Sorry guys, I'm having some technical difficulties on this side. Literally, my mouse pad is delaying. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is like the mind works through archetypes. There are different layers we can consider playfully upon the mind. The realm of imagination is one where every person's imagination can instruct them then. What that means is your mind has a sort of animated force. Its animated force leads to, for example, if right now in front of me I could imagine like a golden lion, you know, running in my backyard. Now that lion is it's there in accordance to the attention on the subjective phenomena being imposed in the objective phenomena. It's like objectivity is the playing field for imagination. Okay, imagination exists into applying to objective reality, subjective um, content in some sense. Now, me seeing that lion run in the backyard, it's like something that's real in an invisible room. It is personally valid in my experience that such a phenomena could be there. Do you see? But in regards to other people, nobody else can see it. You see, so what we get when we what like how the human being is getting a sense of their imagination is that it's visible to their mind, but not to their world, to the physical world. Okay, so imagination is like its own; it's in its own room. That's the way I'm kind of acknowledging intelligence. So some very profound intuitive instruction that came to me early on internally. Sometimes knowledge comes to you from the outside. Sometimes it comes from the inside. So how we're getting a sense of our imagination is as momentary intensifications of attention's imposition into matter. You know, we can't say our attention is purely objective. We can't say it's purely subjective. It appears in an objective kind of manner, but to be honest, it's like just like I'm sitting here right now. Sometimes when I think of my own self, my own self is not just limited to how my body looks. Sometimes I've tried to pinpoint my imagination, literally like catch it when I see it. And I noticed that it's something that it doesn't matter. It's kind of like putting your hand inside a portal that you can't see the other side of. You know, you can move your hand in another world, but you're not really sure what you're moving. You know, so the imagination, of course, it comes to the person as an unknown. Okay. However, that unknown encapsulates your knowledge. This is another way. Another way of saying this is like if I ask you right now, how it does you do you think about your heart beating or does it just beat? And so when you think about life, it's something that is naturally present. That means that the free will doesn't need to change a lot of things. Sometimes the thing about balance is they don't tell you how much balance you need. It's as if the person doesn't have a reference for balance. Anything that you want in this life has to be real to you in some way. What is unreal to you, even if they give it to you, you will not see it. There's a story of this enlightened female saint. This really enlightened woman is walking in this kind of gentle river, and she finds this giant, like, red crystal in the water, and ruby or something, and she just picks it up, and she's like, "What a beautiful rock," you know. And she's walking. She's walking in this river until she gets to a part of the river that is nearby a road on the town, and at the same time, this guy who's like taking bread home, he suddenly sees, oh my god, this lady has a giant ruby in his hand, and his mind suddenly gets the greed of the wealthy, you know, the spirit of greed finds them. And so what he does is he's like, for a second, he forgets about everything. And he runs up to the lady and he says, please give me that rock. As if, like, if you say no, I will still take it. And the female sage gives it. Says, here you go, young man. And the guy takes the ruby. He doesn't even say thank you. He just, the moment the ruby comes into his hand, he puts it like in the middle of the bread, smushing it, and kind of like runs home. He runs home quickly, gets inside, closes the door, puts the smushed bread on the table, and then, you know, as the smushed bread is just naturally open, he sees the ruby. And he holds it in his hand, and he's like, what treasure have I found? He smiles. Suddenly, the ruby falls from his hand to his table, and it's as if his conscience has whispered something in his ear that's making the man cry. The man realizes the true treasure was in the hand of that sage. That woman was so enlightened and free. She could give away instantly that ruby. You see? So the guy's thinking he found treasure, realizing, oh no, the treasure was the ability of that being to just give it away. Sometimes it's not how great you can hold on to things. That is not the coolest thing. It is how you have let go of the infinite universes you have held in your hand. Eons and eons. A bewildered eternal gaze moves through the cosmos, wondering of its purity, wondering of its meaning. Through the human incarnation, it realized the edge of matter. From other incarnations, it realized how empty the universe was. And so it's kind of like the heroic journey of an eternal being to destroy itself. Because transformation is kind of like a fire. You see, I was afraid of the fire, then I realized time is burning the whole world. Time is like a flame encapsulating the cosmos, reminding every creature that regardless how violent and vicious you be on this planet, time is the ultimate conqueror. Time is the true enemy. And when the species realizes time is the enemy, not each other, then this civilization advances. You see? It's kind of like that moment is like human beings, there's different nations at war, suddenly an extraterrestrial attack comes and humanity's like, hold up guys, we can't play our games and we gotta fight for the continuity of our species. It's like in a greater emergency, humanity instantly united. It's as if we had no chance, we didn't have time to negotiate. You see? It's like we had no time to decide what world peace was. Peace, it's as if we had to fight for peace. against another species, for example. But eventually, the full realization is that the temporary is a gift. In my science fiction novel, I've written this thing about this philosopher who's one of the first human beings to access, one of the first philosophers in history to access immortality. Like literally, technology keeps his body alive, but he's like a human being. And so he's reached the point where he is seeing the thousands and thousands of years reaction to his philosophy that had entered the public stream. And so it's kind of like Socrates said some stuff, died. He left this material plane. But his words lived on. And we have no idea how language moves in the minds of people. It is never in one way. You can never truly judge a person's mind if you believe that they can change and if you believe that their free will is being decided by many natural forces. Sometimes it's the environment of the person, sometimes it's the inner environment of the person. There could be a very peaceful place, like even it's like all the times that the villain went to the temple. The villain went into the temple and secretly was making a prayer to God that, in some sense, helped it complete. It's as if evil prayed to God too. And it's the whole universal experience. It's an oscillation between multidimensionality and a sort of singular point. What that means is your mind is constantly uh, gravitating everything to one point, and another part of your mind is multidimensionally destroying that. It's kind of like an oscillation of your intelligence. Kind of chaos and order are like this white dragon and black dragons spiraling around each other in some eternal battle. And to be honest, the ultimate truth is we can't hold on to anything. You tell me something you have been able to hold on to since your childhood. You may say your memories, and I'll grant you that. But even our memories are not the same memories. Because the moment is the same. Literally, it's as if this was another like kind of viewpoint I had that I kind of realized we can never time travel. And it was chaotic. It kind of broke my heart because I love the science fiction that's come out for time travel. But I'm telling you, it broke my heart because you are not the same self. Therefore, you cannot experience the same past. The eyes have changed. The eyes include data that wasn't there before. In order for me to truly go to the past, I must have no awareness of my future. It's as if it's kind of like a hollow endeavor, time travel. But anyways, I'm trying to just suggest that we at first wonder about our personal relationship with the cosmos, then you wonder about your impersonal relationship, which you wonder about the vision of your species. And let me tell you what it's like. There's two dynamics. Either we're temporary beings all suffering, like, oh, we can't do anything about it, we're all suffering too much, you know? Or we are eternal pillars of attention that have not yet dared to change the world that they are changing. You see, it's as if how well do you want to dance? When you dance, you have to follow a flow. But after you have followed that flow and rhythm for many years, you will dance in ways unknown. And that's what they say is a kind of ecstatic, mystical trance. You see, there's two kinds of dancing. There's one conscious dancing. There's another sort of dancing where the body kind of locks into a certain rhythm. And as it's in that certain rhythm, the attention can navigate externally. And it externalizes endlessly because it's all about what you're defining with. Are you defining with matter? Are you defining with that which is still and silent, which is the emptiness, or are you defining with that which is the movement and noise, which is all the sounds of meaning that arise? It's kind of like the search for truth. If you have a blindfold on, you got to first find the true self before you search for it. You see, you have to find a blank piece of paper to start writing on. That is how the mind evolves. It evolves in its effort of action towards itself, which is ultimately the sense of other, which is the world. You know, the situation is humanity's inefficiency, its reason, is a sort of subconscious despair accepted too soon. You have accepted failure before success, and so you're being pulled to failure. You know, this is something I realize about the older generations. I'm like, how did these guys have the strength to go on through the suffering? And then I realized evolutionary, the world was mainly unconscious to them. That means they had some unconscious kind of nature was helping them learn to stand. You know, and nature helped us learn to stand to our free will, evolutionary speaking. Eventually, all interpretations would be natural. You know, it's like the fish in the water, you know, can't deny the water's reality, you know. And so the fish can go on thinking that what it sees is only the world, not realizing the endless depths of the ocean. And that's what Mr. Within is saying. This is why the unknown is standing right beside us and we don't even see it. All the ways that I find every moment has a genius response. That means literally, if you are blessed enough to find a certain attention to, like a sort of self care, this sort of self care doesn't care for just an idea of self, it cares for the experience of the moment. The freedom of our inner dimensions must now be fought for. This is what I found about education that I was like a bit concerned. And it's like when you start teaching young children ideas, because those ideas are the first wave of ideas truly being comprehended by them, their world will be defined by it. You know? This is why when I saw, for example, like, what's his name? What's his name? Elon Musk. His parents had an encyclopedia in their house. When he was a young kid, this man like read the encyclopedia, you know. So it was very fascinating because I realized it's as if he, through his effort, attained imagination. You got to think of your mind. There was this, I forget the guy's name. I read the book a long time ago. I don't even remember the title of the book, but it was this kind of scientist or neurologist or something who was writing about memory structures. And he's like, the way memories kind of neurologically or whatever develop in the brain, it's kind of like you taking this kind of jello and pouring hot ink on the jello. And the ink will constantly, it'll make a dent in the jello, a sort of kind of hollow path. And then if you wait for it to harden again and then pour again the hot ink, it will burn that jello again. And it's as if the way memories are kind of being structured is that we're tunneling through them. Your attention is tunneling through thought in such incredible ways that your story of life is that. So when any person who writes a book about what their life honestly has been to them and reads that book later on will be fascinated. This is why I say writing is one of the efforts of humanity to touch the divine. Because revelation means words on a piece of paper cannot just be written by man's hand. There's an incredible multidimensionality to ideology, knowledge, and language. It has to do with your attention going through various lenses. When someone, for example, let's say right now, me and you wanted to build a science fiction world, okay? How we would go about doing that is first wondering what kind of selves will see what kind of worlds in one world. You set something in motion and the cosmos attains meaning in accordance to that reference point. This is kind of like how the people go to the gym. They have one vision, one image they're meditating on as they're constantly going through the intensity of the physical exercise. I feel it's very fascinating. I've called it many things. I've approached it from many viewpoints. I find that intelligence will appear as a sort of glass orb upon the moment. This glass orb is identifying with not only matter, but the energy that is being that matter. An object is not here alone. It's always with a relationship to something that objective reality has meaning. It is this duality which is the separation of the self. And what that means is this is what I consider personally an advanced communicator. There's been many of them throughout history, and many people are. Any person can become an advanced communicator, to be honest, because it has to do with the realization that you are the advanced communication of the universal sector. What does that mean? That means you suddenly calm down and all your failure and success suddenly just seem like a mirror. Your experience of the moment can navigate between, oscillate between endless multidimensionality. Literally, you can sit in a way and have your attention in a certain way that your imagination endlessly, it's like just like how intensely you can just really quickly, your reflexes can grab a cup being thrown falling on the ground with that same intensity, but through your attention, it's like as you keep your attention still, energy becomes to you. As you keep your attention, it's like a dynamic, it requires energy to, it's as if your mind requires a sort of unique energy to make consider itself multidimensional. Pretty much your relationship with the world through language updates in accordance to your direct experiences. In the simplicity and honesty of just being a simple creature, the complex realities begin shifting at a certain speed. That means, I'll give you an example. For example, the mind of the person conceptualizes the concept that there's seven skies, there's seven heavens, there's seven parallel realities of the earth. Okay? And so then the mind of the person conceptualizes an apocalypse being the way seven skies are being shattered. Do you see? And so then the mind wonders, and eventually the mind will constantly animate infinitely, finding a sort of regression or the opposite expansion of the idea, an endless externalization of the objective meaning. But it will suddenly also notice that eventually it comes to emptiness again and then jumps back into thought, comes into emptiness, jumps back into thought. And that's how every waking up every day in this world feels like. It feels like a new day. We have even Moria Ushiba, the founder of Aikido, saying to his students, "Create each day anew. How dare you bring the past into my classroom?" You know. You will wonder why you're alive, and you will see that it's not about finding meaning per se, it's about creating meaning. But in the creative process, your eyes evolve, therefore, you find things, many things anew, right? So learn to handle, learn to be, you have to learn to be with yourself first, then you can learn to, I find, truly be with the external world, especially walking into nature. There is a divinity to nature, as if the unique energetic fields of various phenomena is welcoming you or not welcoming you. You can feel it. If I tell you something like it's so fascinating, you know what Ayurveda was? Ayurveda, it was an ancient knowledge of medicine. Okay, and it's very fascinating because in regards to Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, at their core, those ideas came from certain people who were very close to the forest. They lived on the edge of the forest. And people went to these people who lived on the edge of the forest, and the person would just feel out what is wrong with the other person and then go into the forest and find a sort of plant. Whether this was a sort of, it was whether it was the shaman doing it, or the Ayurveda is doing it, the yogi doing it, or whoever it was. It was a relationship with the energetic field where existence is projected in as real. It's as if the Rig Vedas tell us the mind is a slave to the real. And I wondered, what does that mean? And it quickly dawned on me that the mind is endlessly simulating reality. I feel global networks will develop in the next 700 years, where eventually individual personalities will find the same table. Let me tell you what I mean. When you care for an urgent situation, the solution comes to you quickly. The evolution of the human being into a collective being. This cannot be ignored. It's a kind of symptom of evolution. I personally wondered, okay, the cosmos has managed to make individual beings with free will. Why has it not managed to make collective beings? If there could be the individual, why not the collective? And slowly in my mind emerged this vision that the species was no longer at being a robot. The species awoke. It was as if suddenly all the nations at war, the heads of nations, these wolves suddenly realized they're part of the same wolf pack. You know? What that means is vision is the most ultimate resource, and vision arrives from the inner realities of people, and the more freedom people are given, the more their inner realities live for the world. Who you decide to be today defines who the future generations will be. And of course, you can't expect much. Like, how would I say it? Like, Lao Tzu says, you must let go of who you are now to become who you are meant to be. You must let go of the past and become the present. Then the present must be let go of, and then there will be the future. And then the future will wonder why it's there, and it will remember all as one moment. There is something called, in mystical circles, they call it the soul of the moment. And when the soul of the moment speaks, what that means is it's not personality driven. It's literally you honor and respect the intelligence of the moment, whichever wherever it's happening from. It's like religions could have, instead of saying just instructing man on what actions take you to hell, they could have just said what actions take you to heaven. And so the world is torn by dualities. It's a playful existential madness. It's like a cosmic drama of elements thinking they're alone and thinking they're together, thinking they're alone, thinking they're together. It just oscillates. To be honest, the only thing that survival could be, I think Darwin kind of noticed this. Darwin came into observance, like he's to some degree, and to philosophers, Darwin is a hero. Because the concept could apply anywhere. You observe how change generates meaning. And I find that becomes an ultimate position of experience. It's kind of like, what is the purpose of life? Imagine the person is thinking, okay, I worked like so many years and then I attain a sort of life. But what if the person imagined so much further than their success? They thought about not just the success of this lifetime, but 10,000 lifetimes to come. You know? And so you'll see it's as if the success is the idea, and ideas don't remain, only attention remains. Conscious attention is a unique opportunity, and the cosmos is aware of this. Something being here rather than nothing, a civilization is as advanced as it's aware of emptiness. That's it. It's as if that extraterrestrial civilization attacking us is we are more enlightened than that civilization. It's like the moths come around the candle, but they only get burned. Inefficiency, disharmony is alive. It's given permission to exist. Evil has a permission to exist. Chaos is here. You cannot stop the lion from chasing the gazelle. And you cannot stop the bullets of blind men. But what can be stopped is the primal attention. It's like attention is key. Any institution, government, anything, any group survives in what it's paying attention to, the values of its meaning. And so everything has been dulled down to a point where people, when they go to work, they're not inspired. It's like they're like, okay, let me do what the robots can do, but in my own inefficient human manner, Eventually, automation will replace labor. It's not a too far-fetched idea because robots don't make less mistakes. The mistakes of robots are always in the hands of the programmers. So I find eventually the species will care about language because it will be the only thing it is left with to work with. And to be honest, really, in the cosmos this big, your mistakes are only in the references of awareness, you can say. Yeah, this guy failed this Olympic thing, imagine, and people went to him, it's like, hey man, you failed, how do you feel? And the guy was like, I'm sorry to break it to you, failure doesn't exist as a concept for me. Yeah. You see the difference. The vision is more stable than the external. It's something where all that Mr. Within is pretty much saying is that you go on trying to learn from the external teacher until you realize the greatest teaching that externality can give you is a mirror. And who can define a moment that was here before definitions? You embrace the unknown as part of the day's adventure, pretty much. And eventually, I find our intelligences will eventually reach a point where they can counteract the unknown. What do I mean? They can counter the unknown. So that means like anytime you have doubt, you'll have a certainty, be able to respond to it. It's kind of seeing like you're walking in two worlds at once. One that is subjectively deciding, and the other that's an objective expression. So Mr. Within is pretty much saying, be aware of your subjective expression. Now is the era of the advanced communicators, those that have realized they have to study and serve their mind, and their mind will teach them how to command. Your mind is nature's will behind your eyes. Nature is not just trees. Nature is the field of intelligence we're all basking in, and it is cosmically endless. The past took the judge's hammer. The future was guilty, and the present could testify. thought can echo in the mind of men. It can echo into their past memories. You could literally have had behaviors where these behaviors, like in your childhood, they had a certain meaning. When you grew up, had a totally different meaning, and then you realize every time you wonder about your past, you're seeing new meaning into it because you're a new self wondering about a past image. The mind is very fascinating. Pretty much, it's like an on-off thing. You keep it on by awareness, self-awareness. You turn it off by ignorance and acceptance of ignorance. The brilliant thing about the freedom of the artist was that the artist saw something that it was worth going towards. And when life becomes like that, it opens up in many ways for the person. You know, it's as if like their inner reality, um, your inner reality for most people is against them. It's against their subjective reality is resisting their objective reality. But imagine your subjective reality becoming the ally of your objective reality. Leonardo da Vinci says to develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn to see, realize how everything connects to everything else. Pretty much like treat your brain like a yin yang symbol, and the moment is your enlightenment, the circle that holds it. Much blessings and namaste.